His name was Robert Redford. They say he wanted to be a mountain man. This here is a short tribute to him and a look at his role in Jeremiah Johnson. May he rest in peace. All right on, folks. Come on in, get yourself warm, get something to eat, and let's talk about one of our favorite movies, Jeremiah Johnson. Alright folks, just last week we got the news that Robert Redford at the age of 89 has passed away. What a wonderful guy. I've been an admirer of Robert Redford and the movies that he's done for many years. And in fact, one of the first movies I saw of Robert Redford was Jeremiah Johnson. I was a young boy growing up in northern New Jersey. We lived around some farms, very rural area. I was in the Boy Scouts. I was very much into camping and spending time in nature. So when I saw this movie, Jeremiah Johnson, I instantly fell in love with it because growing up in New Jersey, we didn't have big mountains like they do out in Colorado, Utah, where a lot of this movie was shot. So I was just in awe of the movie. And that is what really struck me about this movie, was the cinematography. There are such beautiful shots of the western landscape. The snow-covered Rocky Mountains, the red canyons of Bryce and Zion, and footage of the meandering Judith River. You can cut wood and leave it up on the Judith. Riverboat captains will leave you gold if you put out a pouch. Good thing to know when times get hard. Now, in watching Jeremiah Johnson, this really inspired me to travel out west to the Rocky Mountains, travel all around different national parks, and to see what all the hubbub was about with these big mountains. It was kind of like a rite of passage, a coming of age to go travel out to the west. You know, it's kind of like almost like a Lewis and Clark type of expedition. When you're younger, you want to get in the car, get out there and see those mountains. I was 18. We loaded up an old Subaru wagon and traveled all around to the western states. Mostly our goal was to make it from one national park to another. Rocky Mountain National Park, the Grand Tetons, Yellowstone, Glacier, Mount Rainier, Olympic National Park, the whole rainforest, the Redwoods, Yosemite, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, Utah, Arches National Park. It was a great trip. Now, traveling around the West was inspired by many things, but Jeremiah Johnson was a big part of it. Now, the story of Jeremiah Johnson, as it's depicted in the movie, tells of a young man who's in the Mexican War, and he's tired of all the fighting and the warring down below. He wants to go up into the mountains, get away from all this nonsense, and become a mountain man and find some peace up there in the hills. Now, this wanting to live off of the grid, leave life down below and head on up into the mountains, I think it's a romance that a lot of us have often pondered, and I know there's some of us that are actually out there doing it, but it does sound like a good thing to be a mountain man, head up into the hills, get away from this life down below. Now you see, Jeremiah ventures up into the mountains without knowing much about being a mountain man and living off of the land. He's very green, so to speak. And at first he is not having the best of luck with hunting and trapping until he runs into Bearclaw, played by our old friend Will Geer. We all know Will Geer as Grandpa Walton on the show The Waltons, you know, John Boy and the whole gang. At least some of us older folks know. Now, Bearclaw takes young Jeremiah under his wing and teaches him how to survive up in the mountains. He teaches him how to trap and to shoot, and he also imparts some great wisdom upon him. He says to him, "Many a child journeys this high to be different, planning to get from the mountain something that nature's couldn't get 'em below. comes to nothing. Can't cheat the mountain, pilgrim. Mountain has its own ways. Now, what old Bearclaw is talking about here is that you can't just run away from your problems. You can't just head up into the mountains and expect everything to be miraculously resolved. You know, it's that old adage, wherever you go, there you are. We all have our stuff, and we got to deal with that, and it's going to show up down below or up in the mountains. Now, Bearclaw, he also teaches young Jeremiah how to barter and trade with some of the native tribes to get some of these things that he's going to need in order to survive up in the mountains, make things go a little bit smoother. And you see these fellas like Bearclaw. Now, I've had quite a few mentors over the course of my life that have taught me so many things, from landscaping, woodworking, machining, welding, music, spiritual teachings, and I gotta thank those guys. I have a friend of mine, Krishnadas, and he has a saying that he also often says, and it goes, "If we know anything about a path at all, it is because of the great ones that have gone before us. Out of their kindness, they have left some footprints for us to follow." Now, the story of Jeremiah Johnson is based on several different sources, one of them being this book right here called Crow Killer, and this is about the story of John Johnson. Now, if you look at this book here, the saga of liver-eating Johnson, that's what they call him in this book here. His name is not Jeremiah in this book, it is John Johnson. And even in the foreword of this book, they describe it as the stories of John Johnson were word-of-mouth stories, and over the years they became greatly exaggerated. You know, these old Western tales, they'd like to make these guys into savages and just these monsters out there in the wild. But so we've got this book here, and then we also have this book here, Mountain Man by Vardis Fisher. And again, in this book, he is not called Jeremiah Johnson. His name is Sam Minard. Now, this story is a bit more mild, shall we say, but in reading these books, you can see a lot of the dialogue in the screenplay was pulled directly from these stories, but sometimes the lines are said by other characters. The screenplay for Jeremiah Johnson was written by John Milius. Now, John Milius was known for movies such as Conan the Barbarian and Dirty Harry. And at the time of writing this, Jeremiah Johnson, the screenplay, Milius, he was a real kind of macho, shoot-'em-up type of writer. A lot of action, a lot of violence in his movies. John Milius sold his script to Warner Brothers, and then Warner Brothers hired Sidney Pollack. Now, Sidney Pollack worked real closely with Robert Redford in many movies, and it was Redford and Pollack who took the script and tamed it down into an almost cinematic meditation. They cut out much of the violence. They said that the editing was very difficult because much of the footage was beautiful landscape shots of Redford riding his horse through the snow. But it was really Redford and Pollack who made this movie what it is. Now, as we move on with the journey here of Jeremiah Johnson, right, he's been mentored by Bearclaw, teaches him the way of the mountain and how to survive. And then Bearclaw sends Jeremiah Johnson off on his own, and you get to see the ups and downs of Jeremiah Johnson's life. And in one unexpected circumstance, Jeremiah Johnson is married to a woman from the Flathead tribe. And Jeremiah Johnson is kind of taken off guard by this, but it actually turns into a really beautiful relationship. And all of a sudden, Jeremiah Johnson finds himself with a wife. He also finds himself with a son that he had gotten from another scene in the movie, from the crazy woman in the Wolftail Valley. But nonetheless, here is Jeremiah Johnson up in the mountains with this family now. And there's one scene where they build this beautiful cabin up in the mountains, and you can just see it's a nice, fun, loving family. They are having a good time, but right, that story doesn't always go the way you had in mind, and Jeremiah's story was this kind. Now, I actually did learn later that Robert Redford, this scene of building the cabin in the movie, this is drawn from his own life. Now, when he was younger, before he became famous, he did buy a small parcel of land in Utah, and he built a small log cabin on this land with his wife and child. So this scene in the movie, I feel, is pulled directly from Robert Redford's life, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, shortly after building this cabin, and you look at Jeremiah Johnson, and he's living a beautiful life with his new family up in the mountains, and this is when things take quite a turn for old Jeremiah Johnson, and this is when we meet our old friend, Mr. Bentley. Now, you guys remember Mr. Bentley? He was the upstairs neighbor on the Jeffersons, right? Well, we're moving on up to the east side. But in this instance, he's not Mr. Bentley. He comes in as somebody from the Department of Colorado, and he stops by Jeremiah Johnson's cabin to ask him if he will help them to rescue a party that they have traveling in some wagons that are stuck in the snow and in the ice, and Johnson is guilted into going out and helping these people. It looks like it's the last thing that he wants to do. So they go out with Bentley there, and they go to rescue these people, and there is like a shortcut that they could take, but it goes through an old Indian burial ground. Jeremiah Johnson, he warns we should not cut through there. This place is protected by spirits. But of course, Bentley and the gang there, they guilt Jeremiah Johnson into like, oh, we got to save these people. They cut through the burial ground. And upon Jeremiah Johnson's return back home, he gets an eerie feeling. This is Crow territory. And when Jeremiah Johnson arrives back at his cabin, he finds his whole family has been killed, slaughtered. It's just devastating for Jeremiah Johnson. And this, in turn, sets off a whole battle between Jeremiah and the Crow tribe after they've killed his family. So this turns into a great battle, and you see Jeremiah's struggle in his life as this just goes on and on for years. Just a terrible situation for Jeremiah. Now, this is the last thing that Jeremiah Johnson wanted. He just wanted to go up in the mountains, get away from life down below, do a little fishing, a little barbecuing. He's got a nice family up there, and now he finds himself in a battle with the Crow tribe. Now, the Crow tribe, they do not send like the whole tribe at once to attack Jeremiah Johnson. They send one warrior at a time. And at one point, Jeremiah Johnson runs into his old friend, this mountain man by the name of Del Gue, and they're at a campsite, and Del Gue explains to him, he says, "You're lucky there were Crow. Apache would send 50 at once." And he's saying amongst the Crow, the tribe's greatness is determined on how mighty his enemies be. So that's why they're sending one warrior at a time to go after Jeremiah Johnson. Now, there are so many good one-liners in this movie, and we're going to go over some of the best one-liners at the end of this video. But Del Gue, while they're sitting at this campfire, you know, he's talking to Jeremiah, and he's saying, yeah, I don't want to butt in, but hey, Jeremiah, maybe you best go down to a town, get out of these mountains. And Jeremiah says to him, I've been to a town, Dale. Right? But these lines in the movie, this is something I find myself with my brother and friends and those of us that know the movie, and we're always quoting lines from Jeremiah Johnson, having a lot of fun with it. Now, these battles go on, and eventually Jeremiah Johnson meets up with his old mentor and teacher, Bearclaw, and Bearclaw comes across Jeremiah's camp, and Bearclaw can see the pain on Jeremiah's face and the hard road that he's been down with all these battles and losing his family. And Bearclaw asks him, he says, "Were it worth the trouble?" And Jeremiah almost sarcastically replies, "What trouble?" Right? But Bearclaw knows, you know, the pain that Jeremiah is wearing on his face. And then almost one of the best lines in the whole movie. Jeremiah asks Bearclaw, he says to him, "Would you happen to know what month of the year it is?" Now, such a great question and such a cool thing to ponder. You're way up high in the mountains. You have no idea what month of the year it is. You're just kind of guessing, and you can see Jeremiah is thinking about life down below in the valleys there. And Bearclaw replies to him and he says, "Oh, I truly wouldn't, Pilgrim. I'm sorry. Maybe March? I don't believe April." He's like, "Winter's a long time gone. Stays long this high." Now, Bearclaw, in leaving Jeremiah Johnson, he says to him, "March is a green, muddy month down below. Some folks like it, farmers mostly." And he tells him, "You've done well to keep so much hair when so many's after it. I hope you a farewell." And these battles with Jeremiah Johnson and the Crow tribe, they go on until we get to the end of our tale here, when Jeremiah comes across Chief paints his shirt red up in the mountains, and here Jeremiah is expecting another battle, but instead the chief holds up his hand like this in sort of a peace offering, a truce. And Jeremiah is caught a little off guard by this, and Jeremiah also raises his hand up like this as well. He wants to be at peace as well. It's just two men up there in the mountains. No words are said, just the hand held high there. And it's an acknowledgement of each other's suffering, just wanting to end these battles and be at peace. And I think that's what we want for everyone, just everyone to just be at peace. And that is the end of the tale of Jeremiah Johnson. You know, some say he's up there still. I like to think that Jeremiah went on to have some peace, along with paints his shirt red, the chief. So in hearing of the passing of Robert Redford recently, I just wanted to do this video and an acknowledgement of how he has affected my life, and I'm sure he has affected so many. And learning more about his life over the years, I found out that he was a big proponent of preserving land and nature. Him and Will Gear, Grandpa Walton here, they bought up some land in Utah, the Rocky Mountains, Colorado, and big proponents of preserving land, such as I liken them to Teddy Roosevelt, who helped to create so many of our national parks and national forests. I'm a big proponent of that. I think being in touch with nature is such an important thing, and if we can preserve these places for all people to go visit and experience these things, I think these national parks have a profound effect on you when you go and you visit them. I don't know if you've ever been in Yellowstone National Park and have seen a herd of buffalo come across a field, or have watched those geysers go off. These can be profound, life-changing experiences. Being in touch with nature goes a long ways for one's mental health. I think it brings great beauty to life, whether you're high in the Rocky Mountains, pulling a fish out of the Bighorn River, gazing up at the General Sherman tree, the largest living thing on Earth, or staring into a drop of water hanging off of an evergreen bough in the Hoh rainforest. There is something ancient and intrinsic within us that longs to connect with the beauty of nature. And I've had that feeling since I was a young kid, and I think in all of us, we know in our hearts and our minds and our bodies where to go to feel good, to go out into nature, get in touch with the land, the trees, sit by a rolling river. We know it's not looking at a phone, scrolling, making crazy comments, right? Go out, get in touch with the land, get up high in the mountains, visit some national parks, and boy, you just feel so much better when you're there. And with that, I'd like to just send my condolences to Robert Redford, his family, and friends, and thank you for the contribution that you've made in my life with these films. And I think Robert Redford probably lived a really good life, living up there in the hills in Utah, up in the mountains. I feel like he lived a good life and did what he wanted to do, and I'm sure he went in peace. So thank you, Robert Redford. I also want to show you some of the things here that I got in the shop. These are some wood Jeremiah Johnson little plaques here that I have made. If you would like one of these, I have a bunch of them. I made these a while back. Here we've got Bearclaw, Jeremiah Johnson, right? Of course, you guys know I'm a big Jeremiah Johnson fan. We have some smaller sizes. I'm going to have this up for sale on my website. I'll put a link in the description to this video, rightonwithjohncrane.com. Let's take a look at a couple other things before we go. Now and again, I like to collect some movie memorabilia, and I picked up this poster here, and this is about a 7-foot long poster, original Jeremiah Johnson. This would have went like in a movie theater or high up on a wall. You can see here 1972 Warner Brothers, but what a cool poster to have. I want to do a little restoration on this and put it on a canvas backing, but I think this is pretty cool. I wanted to show you guys that. Of course, here is some of our little wood plaques that I made, all different sizes. I think maybe I have about 20 or 25 of these that I have made up, and those are definitely pretty cool. Another thing that I have here is this. This is a movie supplement. You know, a movie theater would have gotten this. This is pretty cool too. Here is a note from the Boy Scouts of America, sending a note to the makers of the movie, just acknowledging that they liked the movie. That's pretty cool. You know, just random pictures here of Jeremiah Johnson, you know, Redford and the gang here in different scenes. And you guys all know I've been working on my bear head hat. I tanned this bear skin last year, and this is going to be coming up soon. I'm going to show you how I make that famous hat that Robert Redford is wearing when he meets up with Bearclaw towards the end of the movie. All right, and we'll end this little tribute to Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson, with some of our favorite lines in the movie. And also, if you have a favorite line, please drop it in the comments. No, you damn fool. Slide it up over the saddle. Elk don't know how many feet a horse have. If you turn down this gift, they'll slit you, me, Caleb, and the horses from crotch to eyeball with a dull deer antler. Now, boy, are you sure that you can skin Grizz? The Rocky Mountains is the marrow of the world. And by God, I was right. Thanks a lot for watching, folks, and thanks for taking the time to let me share this with you guys. And please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what you're thinking. It goes a long way for the channel here. All right. I'll see y'all soon. Watch your top knot.